Lillian had always believed that leaving Marcus was the hardest thing she would ever do. For 3 years, she had convinced herself that his possessiveness was passion, that his control was care. It took her best friend practically dragging her out of that relationship to see the truth, to finally understand that love shouldn't feel like drowning. 6 months had passed since she walked away, 6 months of rebuilding herself piece by piece, of learning to breathe without someone's hand around her throat. She had moved across the city, changed her number, blocked him everywhere. She thought she was safe. She thought she was free. The gallery opening was supposed to be a celebration. Lillian's boss, an art dealer with connections that stretched across continents, had invited her to this exclusive event in downtown Manhattan. It was the kind of place where champagne flowed like water, and every painting cost more than she made in a year. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but understated, her natural curls falling past her shoulders. She didn't belong in this world of excess and wealth, but she had learned to navigate it with quiet confidence, her intelligence and work ethic earning her respect in spaces where she was often the only black woman in the room. She was standing near a massive abstract painting, genuinely lost in the swirls of crimson and gold when she felt it, that familiar crawl of unease down her spine. Before she could turn, his voice slithered into her ear. "Lillian, you look beautiful." Marcus. Her blood turned to ice. He was standing too close, that practiced smile on his face, the one he used when he wanted something. He looked exactly the same sharp suit, expensive cologne, that underlying menace he dressed up. "How did you find me?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Baby, you can't just disappear on me like that. We have history." He reached for her arm and she stepped back, her heart hammering. "We're done, Marcus. I told you that 6 months ago. You don't mean that. You're just confused." His smile tightened, eyes darkening. "We need to talk somewhere private." "No." The word felt powerful leaving her lips. "I have nothing to say to you." Something flickered across his face, something ugly. Before she could react, his hand shot out, gripping her wrist hard enough to hurt. He yanked her toward him, his other hand sliding around her waist, pulling her against his chest. She could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Just one kiss," he murmured, his lips descending toward hers. "To remind you what you're missing." Lillian twisted her face away, pushing against his chest with her free hand, but his grip was iron. Panic clawed at her throat. The gallery noise seemed to fade, the crowd of beautiful people blind to her struggle. She opened her mouth to scream when suddenly Marcus went completely still. "Let her go." The voice that cut through the air was quiet, almost conversational, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. It was accented, Russian, each word precisely measured like bullets loaded into a chamber. Lillian felt Marcus's grip loosen slightly, felt him turn his head. "This is a private conversation," Marcus said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "I wasn't asking." Lillian managed to turn her head enough to see who had spoken. The man standing 3 feet away didn't look particularly threatening at first glance. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with broad shoulders filling out an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was swept back, revealing a face that was striking rather than handsome, all sharp angles and intensity. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. Gray, cold as a Moscow winter, they were fixed on Marcus with a focus that promised violence. Marcus must have felt it too because his hands fell away from Lillian completely. She stumbled back, rubbing her wrist. "Who the hell are you?" Marcus demanded, trying to summon bravado. The man didn't answer him. Instead, those glacial eyes shifted to Lillian, and something in them softened, just a fraction. "Are you all right?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "I asked you a question," Marcus said, stepping forward. It was a mistake. The stranger moved with the kind of speed that spoke of training, of violence mastered and controlled. He didn't touch Marcus, didn't need to. He simply shifted his position, and suddenly 2 other men appeared from the crowd, both built like walls, both moving to flank the stranger. The message was clear. "You put your hands on a woman without her consent," the stranger said, his voice still that dangerous quiet. "In my city, at an event I'm attending." He took 1 step closer to Marcus, and Lillian watched her ex-boyfriend actually pale. "You just made your last mistake." "I don't know who you think you are," Marcus started, but his voice wavered. "Viktor Cherkasov." The name dropped like a stone into water, ripples spreading outward. Lillian saw recognition flash across Marcus's face, saw fear replace his anger. She didn't know the name, but clearly Marcus did. "Now you're going to leave this city, and you're never going to approach this woman again, because if I hear that you've so much as looked at her." Victor paused, his expression never changing, that cold politeness never wavering. "Well, you seem like an intelligent man. I trust you can imagine the consequences." Marcus looked between Victor and Lillian, his jaw working. For a moment, she thought he might do something stupid. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd with quick, scared steps. The silence that followed felt enormous. Lillian realized she was shaking, adrenaline flooding her system now that the danger had passed. She looked up at Viktor Cherkasov, this stranger who had intervened with such casual authority, and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Thank you," she managed. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." "It's nothing." He dismissed her gratitude with a slight movement of his hand. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, still rubbing her wrist. "Just scared." Something flickered in those gray eyes. "You have no reason to be scared now. He won't bother you again." There was such certainty in his voice, such absolute confidence that Lillian believed him, but it also raised 1,000 questions. Who was this man that Marcus, with all his arrogance and entitlement, had fled from like a frightened animal? "I should go," she said, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of the way his presence seemed to fill the space around them. "Let me have someone drive you home." It wasn't quite a command, but it wasn't quite a request either. "That's not necessary. I can take the subway." "I insist." He gestured to one of the men flanking him, who immediately pulled out a phone. "It's late, and after what just happened, I would feel better knowing you arrived safely." Lillian wanted to argue, wanted to insist on her independence, but the truth was she was still shaking, still processing. And something about the way Victor looked at her, like she was something precious that needed protecting, made her nod in agreement. "Okay, thank you. What is your name?" he asked as they walked toward the gallery exit, his men maintaining a discreet distance. "Lillian. Lillian." He repeated it, the Russian accent curling around the syllables in a way that made her name sound like something exotic. "It suits you." A black Mercedes pulled up to the curb with impossible timing. Victor opened the door himself, waiting for her to slide into the leather interior. "Good night, Lillian," he said, and there was something in the way he said it, some quality she couldn't name, that made her think this wasn't really goodbye. The car pulled away into the Manhattan night, and Lillian sat in the back seat, her heart still racing, trying to understand what had just happened. She pulled out her phone and typed the name into Google. What she found made her blood run cold. Viktor Cherkasov, alleged head of the Cherkasov Bratva, one of the most powerful Russian organized crime families on the East Coast. The articles were careful, filled with words like alleged and suspected, but the implication was clear. The man who had just saved her was a mafia boss. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Lillian lay in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The way Victor had moved, the way men twice his size had appeared at his slightest gesture, the way Marcus had fled. She should have been terrified. She should have been planning to never set foot in that part of the city again. Instead, all she could think about was the way Victor's eyes had softened when he looked at her, the way he had asked if she was hurt, the genuine concern in his voice. She told herself she would never see him again. That it was a strange, singular encounter, a moment of intersection between two completely different worlds. She almost believed it. 3 days later, flowers arrived at her office. Not a bouquet, but a single, perfect white rose in an elegant box, accompanied by a card written in precise handwriting. "I hope you are well. VC." Her coworker, Sarah, practically materialized at her desk. "Who's VC? Do you have a secret admirer?" Lillian stared at the rose, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. "It's nothing, just someone I met. Someone who sends flowers that probably cost more than my rent. Honey, that's not nothing." She was right, of course. Everything about this was not nothing. Lillian carefully placed the rose in water, trying to ignore the way her hands trembled slightly. She should throw it away. She should forget about Viktor Cherkasov and his dangerous world. She should be grateful for the rescue and move on with her life. But that night, lying in bed, she found herself looking at his name on her phone. The car service had been logged, and she had his company's contact information. She could reach out. She could thank him properly. She could, no. She deleted the number. This was insane. He was a criminal, allegedly or not. She was a regular person with a regular job and a regular life. Their worlds had no business colliding. The decision lasted exactly 4 more days. Lillian was leaving work late, the October sky already dark when she noticed the car. The same black Mercedes parked across the street. Her heart kicked into overdrive. Was someone watching her? Was this about Marcus? Had he sent someone too? The back window rolled down and Victor's face appeared. Lillian. May I speak with you? She should have said no. Should have walked away, caught the subway, gone home, and locked her door. Instead, she found herself crossing the street, found herself leaning down to meet those gray eyes. Is something wrong? She asked. Get in, please, just for a moment. Every rational thought in her head screamed at her not to. But there was something in his expression, something almost uncertain, that didn't match the image of the cold crime lord. She got in. The interior of the car was exactly as she remembered, leather and luxury, but this time Victor was there, filling the space with his presence. He was dressed more casually than at the gallery, dark jeans and a black sweater, but he still radiated that same controlled power. I wanted to make sure you were all right, he said once the door closed. That your ex-boyfriend hasn't tried to contact you again. He hasn't. I think you scared him pretty thoroughly. A ghost of a smile touched Victor's lips. Good. They sat in silence for a moment, and Lillian found herself studying him in the dim light. His face was all angles and shadows, a thin scar cutting through his left eyebrow that she hadn't noticed before. He looked tired, she realized, like a man carrying weight he couldn't put down. Thank you for the flower, she said finally. It was beautiful. I'm glad you liked it. He turned to look at her fully, and the intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. The honesty of it shocked her. Men like him, powerful men, didn't admit to things like that. They played games, maintained distance, used charm as a weapon. But Victor said it like it was simply a fact, like he was reporting the weather. I don't understand why, she said, because it was true. She was nobody, nothing special, just a woman who worked for an art dealer and lived in a fifth-floor walk-up in Brooklyn. Neither do I. He said it with something that might have been frustration. I've built my life on control, on discipline, on never allowing distractions. And then I saw that man touching you and something in me. He paused, seeming to search for words. I wanted to kill him, not as a message, not as business. I wanted to destroy him for putting his hands on you. Lillian's pulse was racing. She should have been terrified by his words, by the casual mention of violence. Instead, she felt something else entirely, something warm and dangerous unfurling in her chest. I looked you up, she admitted. I know who you are, what you do. And yet you got in my car. I don't know why I did that. Yes, you do. His voice dropped lower, intimate in the enclosed space. You feel it too. This thing between us. She wanted to deny it, wanted to lie, but she had spent 3 years in a relationship built on lies. She was done with dishonesty, even the kind meant to protect herself. I don't belong in your world, she said instead. My world is not a place for someone like you, Victor agreed. You're too good, too pure. You have light in you, Lillian, and my world only knows darkness. Then why are we having this conversation? He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed his fingers against her cheek. The touch was gentle, reverent almost, and Lillian felt electricity race down her spine. Because I'm a selfish man, he said quietly, and I want you anyway. The smart thing would have been to open the door and leave, to go back to her safe, predictable life where the most dangerous thing she faced was a difficult client or a delayed. But Lillian had spent so long being smart, being careful, being what other people expected her to be. And something about Victor, about the way he looked at her like she was the answer to a question he hadn't known to ask, made her want to be reckless. I don't know anything about your life, she said, but she didn't pull away from his touch. Ask me anything. Are the things they say about you true? The articles online? Some of them. He didn't look away, didn't flinch. I won't lie to you, Lillian. I've done things that would make you run from me. I've hurt people. I've made choices that keep me awake at night. But I've also protected my people, built something from nothing, survived when I should have died. Why are you telling me this? Because if you're going to be part of my life, even for a moment, you deserve to know what that means. I don't want you under any illusions about who I am. And what if I can't accept it? Something painful flashed across his face. Then I'll have someone drive you home and I'll never bother you again. Despite what you might think, I don't force my attention on anyone. Lillian believed him. She also believed that walking away from this, from him, would haunt her for the rest of her life. I have conditions, she heard herself say. Victor's eyebrows rose slightly. Conditions? If I'm going to spend time with you, get to know you, I need honesty, complete honesty. I've had enough of lies and secrets to last a lifetime. Agreed. And I won't be controlled. I won't be told what to do, where to go, who to see. I spent 3 years in that kind of relationship, and I'll die before I do it again. I would never, He stopped, seemed to collect himself. I'm protective, sometimes excessively so, but I have no desire to cage you. Bird that's caged eventually forgets how to sing. The poetry of it surprised her, revealed depths she hadn't expected. Okay. Let's see where this goes, but slowly, I'm not jumping into anything. For the first time since she'd met him, Victor smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, almost boyish. Slowly, I can do slowly. He couldn't actually. Over the next few weeks, Lillian discovered that Viktor Cherkasov didn't know the meaning of flowers arrived at her office every few days, always a single stem, always different. White roses, red tulips, purple orchids. He sent a car for her on Friday evening, which took her to a private rooftop restaurant where he was waiting, looking devastating in a navy suit. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, and he listened to her in a way Marcus never had, like every word she spoke mattered. Tell me about your family, she said over dessert, some elaborate chocolate creation she barely tasted. My father was Bratva in Russia, Victor said, swirling the vodka in his glass. He taught me early that weakness is death. I was 8 the first time I saw him kill a man. Lillian's breath caught. 8. It's a different world where I come from. You learn fast or you don't survive. His eyes were distant, looking at something she couldn't see. He was shot when I was 16. Betrayed by someone he trusted. I took over, killed the man responsible, and spent the next 20 years building what we have now. Do you regret it, the life you've lived? Every day. The admission was quiet but raw. But regret doesn't change the past. It only makes the present harder to bear. She reached across the table, placed her hand over his. Victor looked down at their joined hands like he was seeing a miracle. You don't have to carry it alone, she said softly. Her name was almost a prayer on his lips. Do you understand what you're offering? I understand that everyone deserves someone who sees them, really sees them. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. His grip was warm, solid, and for just a moment, the walls he kept so carefully maintained seemed to crack. Their courtship, if it could be called that, existed in a strange bubble. Victor never brought her into his business, never exposed her to the darker elements of his life. Their dates were in exclusive restaurants, private boxes at the theater, quiet walks through Central Park when the rest of the city slept. He was unfailingly respectful, never pushing for more than she was willing to give, even though the tension between them built with every passing day. She learned things about him in fragments. That he read Dostoevsky in the original Russian when he couldn't sleep, that he had a younger sister in Moscow he sent money to every month, that his favorite food was his grandmother's pelmeni, which he hadn't tasted in 15 years, that he played chess at a grandmaster level and had never lost a game. My father taught me, he explained one evening in his penthouse apartment, the chessboard set up between them. He said chess was life. Every move has consequences. You must think 10 steps ahead. And in life, Lillian asked, moving her bishop, are you always thinking 10 steps ahead? I used to be. He captured her bishop with his knight. Until I met you, now I find myself living in the moment more than I ever have. Is that a bad thing? I don't know yet. He looked up from the board, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her heart ache. It's terrifying, if I'm honest. I've spent 20 years in control of everything. And then you walk into my life, and suddenly I can't control anything. Not how I feel, not what I want, not who I'm becoming. Lillian stood, walked around the table, and sat on the arm of his chair. Victor turned to face her, his hand coming to rest on her hip, the touch burning through the fabric of her dress. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, she whispered. Being out of control. With anyone else, it would be. His other hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. But with you, I think I could burn and be grateful for the warmth. The kiss, when it came, felt inevitable. His lips were soft against hers, the kiss gentle at first, almost questioning. Lillian answered by threading her fingers through his hair, pulling him closer. Victor made a sound low in his throat and deepened the kiss, one hand sliding to the small of her back, the other tangling in her curls. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against hers. I'm in love with you, he said, the words simple and devastating. I know it's too soon, I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but I'm in love with you, Lillian, completely, utterly, in a way that terrifies me. Tears pricked at her eyes because she felt it too, this overwhelming thing that had grown between them. Victor, you don't have to say it back. I just need it. I love you too. The words tumbled out, honest and true. God help me, I love you too. He kissed her again, and this time there was nothing gentle about it. It was possession and promise, need and devotion, and Lillian lost herself in it completely. When Victor lifted her into his arms and carried her toward the bedroom, she didn't protest. When he laid her on the bed and looked at her like she was everything he'd ever wanted, she pulled him down to her. They made love with the lights of Manhattan glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, and it was nothing like it had been with Marcus. Victor touched her like she was precious, like every gasp and sigh was a gift. He whispered to her in Russian, words she didn't understand but felt in her bones. And when they finally collapsed together, tangled in silk sheets, Lillian felt like she had finally found the place she was meant to be. "Stay with me," Victor murmured against her hair as sleep pulled at them both. "Stay with me tonight, tomorrow, always. Always is a long time. Not long enough." She fell asleep in his arms, safe and warm, believing that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. Reality came crashing back 3 days later. Lillian was at work when Sarah burst into her office, her face pale. "Lil, you need to see this." The news article was from a tabloid, but that didn't make it. Photos of her and Victor at dinner, walking in the park, entering his building. The headline screamed, "Russian mob boss's new girlfriend, who is mystery woman?" Her phone started ringing immediately. Her mother, frantic and scared. Her boss, concerned about the attention. Friends she hadn't spoken to in months, suddenly very interested in her life. And underneath it all, a cold thread of fear, because being known as Viktor Cherkasov's girlfriend made her a target. Victor appeared at her apartment that evening, his face grim. "I'm sorry," he said without preamble. "I should have been more careful. I should have protected you better. It's not your fault." "It is." He paced her small living room like a caged animal. "Everything about my life is dangerous, Lillian. I knew that and I pursued you anyway. I've put you at risk. I made my own choices." "Did you?" He turned to face her, and the anguish in his expression broke her heart. "Did you really understand what you were choosing, what being with me means?" "I'm not stupid, Victor. I never said you were, but knowing something intellectually and living it are different things. Right now, every enemy I have, every rival family, every person who wants to hurt me, they know about you. They know you're my weakness." The word hung between them. Weakness. "Is that what I am to you?" Lillian asked quietly. "No, God, no." He crossed to her in 3 strides, cupping her face in his hands. "You're my strength. You're the only good thing in my life. But to them, to the vultures circling, you're leverage. And I can't." His voice cracked slightly. "I can't bear the thought of you being hurt because of me." "So what are you saying?" He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were wet. "I'm saying maybe we should stop. Maybe I should walk away before something happens to you." Pain that lanced through her chest was physical. "Is that what you want?" "What I want is irrelevant. What matters is keeping you safe. Don't I get a say in this?" "Lillian, no." She pulled his hands away from her face, holding them tight. "You don't get to make this decision for me. You promised me honesty, Victor. You promised me you wouldn't try to control my life. Was that a lie?" "Of course not, but then let me choose. Let me decide if the risk is worth it." "How can I ask you to take that risk?" "You're not asking, I'm offering." She stepped closer, looking up at him with all the love and determination she possessed. "I'm not some fragile thing that needs to be locked away for safekeeping. I'm a grown woman who knows exactly what she's choosing, and I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us. Even if it means danger, even if it means looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. Even then." Victor pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe, and she felt wetness on her shoulder where his face pressed against her neck. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Probably not, but you have me anyway." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, making silent promises. When Victor finally pulled back, his expression had shifted into something harder, more determined. "Okay, if you're staying, if we're doing this, then we do it right. I'm assigning security to you. I know you hate the idea, but it's non-negotiable." Lillian wanted to argue, but she saw the fear underneath his command. "Okay, and you move in with me. My building has security, it's safer." "Victor, please." The word was raw. "I need to know you're safe. I need to be able to protect you." She thought about her little apartment, her independence, her life before him. And she thought about waking up next to him every morning, falling asleep in his arms every night, building something real together. "Okay," she said again. Relief flooded his features. He kissed her deeply, pouring everything he couldn't say into the press of his lips against hers. "I love you," he murmured against her mouth. "I love you so much it scares me. I love you too, even when you're being overbearing and bossy." He laughed, and the sound was beautiful. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. Lillian moved into Victor's penthouse, her modest belongings looking almost comical in the vast space. She met his inner circle, men with hard eyes who looked at her with suspicion, until Victor made it clear she was under his protection. She adjusted to having security follow her, learned to ignore the black SUV that trailed her to work and back. But she also discovered a routine with Victor that felt surprisingly normal. He made her coffee in the morning, strong and black the way she liked it. They had dinner together almost every night, sometimes at expensive restaurants but more often at home, where Victor would cook Russian dishes from memory while she sat on the counter and watched. They fell into bed together with a passion that never seemed to dim, learning each other's bodies like sacred texts. "Tell me about your dreams," Victor said one night, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "The things you want from life. I used to want to be an artist," Lillian admitted. "Before I had to be practical, before bills and rent and reality got in the way, I wanted to paint. So paint. It's not that simple. Why not?" He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. "I have an entire room in this apartment doing nothing. Turn it into a studio, paint, create, do the thing that makes your soul sing. Victor, I can't ask you to. You're not. Tomorrow we'll get supplies. Canvases, paints, whatever you need." Tears burned in her eyes. "You barely know me and you're offering me this? I know everything I need to know. You're brilliant, talented, and you've spent too long making yourself small for other people. Not anymore. Not with me." She kissed him then, trying to pour her gratitude and love into the press of her lips. Victor responded with the kind of tenderness that always surprised her, this dangerous man who touched her like she was made of glass. True to his word, he had an art studio set up within a week. Lillian started painting again, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Victor would sometimes sit and watch her work, silent and still, and she felt more seen in those moments than she ever had in her life. It was perfect. Too perfect. And Lillian had lived long enough to know that nothing perfect lasted. The threat came on a Tuesday. Victor was in a meeting when his phone rang. Lillian watched his face go completely blank, that mask of ice sliding into place that she'd only seen a few times before. "Where?" he asked, his voice lethal calm. A pause. "How many?" Another pause. "I want every man we have on this. Now." He ended the call and looked at Lillian, and what she saw in his eyes made her blood run cold. "What's wrong?" "There's a problem. A rival family, they're making moves, aggressive ones." He was already texting, his fingers flying over the phone. "I need to handle this." "How bad is it?" He looked at her, seemed to debate lying, then remembered his promise. "Bad enough that I'm sending you somewhere safe until it's resolved." "What? No, Victor, I'm not leaving you." "This isn't a discussion, Lillian. These people, they don't play games. If they get their hands on you," he stopped, his jaw clenching. "I won't risk it, and I won't abandon you." "Damn it, Lillian." The rare show of temper startled them both. Victor took a breath, visibly collecting himself. "I can't focus on what needs to be done if I'm worried about your safety. Please, please let me send you away just for a few days." She saw the fear underneath his anger, the genuine terror at the thought of her being hurt. "Where would I go?" "I have a house. It's secure, off the grid. Alexei will take you, he's my best man, you'll be safe there. And you? I'll do what I've always done, win." She wanted to argue more, wanted to insist on staying, but she could see the resolve in his eyes, and the truth was she would be a liability in whatever was coming. She didn't know this world, didn't understand its rules. "Promise me you'll be careful," she said finally. "Always." He pulled her close, kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "This will be over soon, and then we'll go away somewhere. Paris, maybe. You can paint the Seine. I'll hold you to that." Alexei appeared within the hour, a mountain of a man with kind eyes. Victor walked her to the car, his hand never leaving the small of her back. "Call me when you arrive," he said, "and every day I need to hear your voice. You'll answer. Always." One more kiss, desperate and deep, and then she was in the car, watching Victor disappear as they pulled away. Lillian pressed her hand to the window, a sense of foreboding settling over her like a shroud. The house upstate was beautiful, a sprawling property surrounded by woods, but it felt like a cage. Lillian paced the rooms, painted to distract herself, called Victor every few hours. He always answered, but their conversations grew shorter, more tense. She could hear the strain in his voice, the weight of whatever he was dealing with. "Talk to me," she begged on the third day. "Tell me what's happening. It's complicated. There are factions within factions, old grudges surfacing, but I'm handling it. Are you safe?" A pause. "Define safe." "Victor, I'm careful, that's the best I can offer." "That's not good enough. It has to be. Lillian, I need you to trust me. I will end this and I will come for you. But right now, I need to know you're out of harm's way." She wanted to scream, wanted to demand he tell her everything, but she heard something in his voice that stopped her. Exhaustion. Bone-deep weariness that spoke of days without sleep, of carrying burdens too heavy for one person. I trust you, she said instead. I love you and I trust you. Thank you. The words were barely a whisper. That means everything. The call ended, and Lillian stared at her phone, fear gnawing at her gut. The breaking point came on day 5. Alexei burst into the house, his face grim. We need to move now. What? Why? There's been a breach. Someone knows about this location. Victor's orders are to get you to the secondary safe house immediately. Lillian's heart hammered. Is he okay? He's alive, that's all I know, we need to go. She grabbed her bag, following Alexei to the car. They were halfway down the drive when she heard it. Gunshots, sharp cracks splitting the air. Alexei cursed in Russian, gunning the engine. The car lurched forward, and Lillian twisted in her seat to see black SUVs emerging from the tree line. Get down! Alexei shouted. She ducked, pressing herself into the footwell as bullets shattered the rear window. Alexei drove like a man possessed, the car fishtailing around curves, engine screaming. More gunshots, closer now. Lillian heard Alexei grunt in pain, but the car didn't slow. Almost there, he muttered. Almost there. They burst onto a main road, and suddenly there were more cars, Victor's men boxing in their pursuers. The gunfire faded, replaced by the sound of screeching tires and shouting. Alexei pulled into an abandoned parking garage, finally stopping. Are you hurt? He asked, turning to her. Lillian shook her head, though she was shaking so hard she could barely speak. You are. Blood seeped through his jacket, high on his shoulder. It's nothing, we need to keep moving. You need a hospital. No hospitals, Victor's orders. He pulled out his phone, fingers clumsy with blood. Boss, yes, we're secure, headed to the secondary now, she's fine, not a scratch. He handed her the phone. Victor's voice came through, tight with barely controlled panic. Lillian, are you hurt? I'm fine. Alexei's shot, Victor, he needs medical attention. He'll get it at the safe house, are you truly all right? I'm scared. I know, and I'm sorry, this is my fault, all of it. When will I see you? Soon. I'm ending this tonight one way or another, and then I'm coming for you. Promise me. I promise. I love you, Lillian. Remember that no matter what happens. The call ended before she could respond. The next 12 hours were the longest of Lillian's life. The secondary safe house was actually a fortified apartment in the city, surrounded by Victor's men. A doctor came to treat Alexei's wound, and Lillian paced the length of the living room until her feet ached. No call came. By dawn, she was frantic. She tried Victor's number over and over, but it went straight to voicemail. None of his men would tell her anything, their faces carefully blank. Please, she begged Alexei, who was resting on the couch, his shoulder bandaged. Just tell me if he's alive. I don't know, he admitted, and the honesty of it was worse than any lie. Communications went dark 3 hours ago. That's protocol when things get hot, but... He trailed off, and Lillian felt her world tilting. When the door finally opened, she spun around, hope and fear warring in her chest, but it wasn't Victor. It was Dmitri, Victor's second-in-command, and his face was grave. Is he dead? The question tore out of her. No, he's alive, but he's hurt. The doctors are with him now. Lillian didn't wait to hear more. She pushed past Dmitri, running for the elevator, ignoring the shouts behind her. She knew where he would be. His penthouse, the place he felt safest. The ride up felt eternal, and when the doors opened, she saw blood on the marble floor. Victor! She screamed, following the trail. Victor! She found him in his bedroom, on the bed, surrounded by 3 men in surgical scrubs. There was so much blood, soaking through bandages, staining the white sheets. Victor's face was pale, his eyes closed, but his chest rose and fell. Alive, he was alive. What happened? She demanded, pushing her way to his side. One of the doctors tried to stop her, but she shoved past him, taking Victor's hand. It was cold. Gunshot wound, one of the doctors said. He's lost a lot of blood, but the bullet missed anything vital. He'll recover. Victor's eyes fluttered open at the sound of her voice. Lillian, you're supposed to be at the safe house. Do you really think I could stay away? Tears streamed down her face. You idiot, you scared me half to death. Sorry, his voice was weak, but he managed a slight smile. You should see the other guy. This isn't funny. I know. He squeezed her hand, the pressure faint. It's over. The threat's eliminated. You're safe now. That's what matters. You're what matters. She brought his hand to her lips, kissing his knuckles. Don't you ever scare me like that again. I'll try. The doctors shooed her out so they could finish their work, but Lillian refused to leave the penthouse. She sat in the hallway, listening to the sounds of medical equipment, of Victor's occasional grunt of pain, of her own ragged breathing. When they finally emerged hours later, assuring her he would be fine with rest and antibiotics, she slipped back into the room. Victor was sleeping, his face still too pale, but some color had returned to his lips. Lillian curled up next to him carefully, mindful of his bandages, and pressed her face into his shoulder. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you so much." His arm came around her, weak but there. "Love you too, stay with me. Always." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, survivors of a storm. Recovery was slow. Victor was a terrible patient, trying to work from bed, arguing with doctors, pushing himself too hard. Lillian appointed herself his keeper, forcing him to rest, bringing him food, reading to him when the pain medication made him too fuzzy to focus on work. "You're bossy," he complained one afternoon, but there was no heat in it. "You're stubborn. We balance each other out. How is it that I run an empire, command hundreds of men, and yet you have me completely under your control? Because you love me. Devastatingly." He pulled her down for a kiss, gentle because his... "Marry me?" Lillian froze. "What? Marry me. I know it's too soon. I know we've only been together a few months, but I almost died, Lillian. And the only thing I could think about was how much time I've wasted, how many years I spent alone when I could have been with you. Victor, I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to fight with you about my terrible patient behavior. I want to watch you paint and grow old with you. Marry me." She looked at him, this complicated, dangerous, tender man who had crashed into her life and changed everything. She thought about the risks, about the reality of being married to a man like Viktor Cherkasov, and then she thought about a life without him, and the choice became simple. Yes. His smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you, even though you're bossy and overbearing and you almost got yourself killed." He kissed her again, deeper this time, ignoring the protest of his healing body. "I promise to try not to get shot again. That's a low bar, Victor. It's the best I can offer." She laughed despite herself, and then she was crying, and Victor was holding her, whispering Russian endearments into her hair. They were married 3 months later, a small ceremony with only a few trusted people in attendance. Lillian wore a simple white dress, her curls crowned with flowers, and Victor looked at her like she hung the moon. When he slid the ring onto her finger, a platinum band studded with diamonds that probably cost more than most people made in a year, his hand shook. "I, Viktor Cherkasov, take you, Lillian, to be my wife," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I promise to protect you, to cherish you, to stand beside you in all things. I promise to be worthy of the gift you've given. Your love has saved me in ways I can't even express. You are my light in the darkness, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." Lillian was openly crying by the time he finished, and her own vows were barely coherent through the tears. But when they kissed, sealing their commitment, she felt something settle in her chest. This was right. This was home. The reception was at Victor's penthouse, champagne and laughter and music. Dmitri gave a toast that made everyone laugh, and Victor threatened him playfully. Alexei, his shoulder fully healed, danced with Lillian and told her she was too good for his boss, but he was glad she'd stuck around anyway. Later, when the guests had left and they were finally alone, Victor carried her to bed despite her protests about his ribs. "You're going to hurt yourself," she scolded. "Worth it." He laid her gently on the mattress, following her down. "My wife, I never thought. A wedding ring, a woman who loves me, a future that doesn't just involve survival. You have it now, you have me. I'll never take that for granted." They made love slowly, tenderly, a reaffirmation of every promise they'd made. And afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Lillian felt a peace she'd never known. Life settled into a new rhythm. Lillian continued to work part-time for the art dealer, though Victor would have happily supported her entirely. She painted, her work growing bolder, more confident. Victor gradually brought her deeper into his life, introducing her to business associates, teaching her the chess game of his world. She learned which families were allies, which were enemies, which were waiting for any sign of weakness. "You're good at this," Victor observed one evening after she'd navigated a particularly tricky social situation at a charity gala. "Reading people, understanding the undercurrents. Marcus taught me to watch for signs, to anticipate mood shifts. I just never thought I'd use those skills in this context." Victor's expression darkened at the mention of her ex. "Has he tried to contact you, at all?" "No, I think you scared him thoroughly enough that first night." "Good." He pulled her close, possessive and protective. "You're mine now, legally, emotionally, in every way that matters, and I take care of what's mine. I'm not property, Victor." "I didn't." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I just mean that your safety, your happiness, it's my priority. Always." She softened, leaning into him. "I know, and for what it's worth, you're mine too. Completely." They built a life together, not without challenges, but with love and understanding. Victor made efforts to separate his business from their home life, and while Lillian knew she could never be entirely removed from his world, she appreciated the boundary. They traveled when they could, Paris and Rome and Barcelona, painting the cities and making love in hotel rooms with views of ancient architecture. On their first anniversary, Victor surprised her with a gallery show. He'd been secretly arranging it for months, pulling strings, calling in favors. Lillian's paintings were displayed in a prestigious Chelsea gallery, her name on the invitation in elegant script. "How did you do this?" she asked, stunned, as they walked through the space on opening night. "I made some calls. Your talent speaks for itself, Lillian. I just made sure the right people had the chance to see it." The show was a success. 3 paintings sold that first night, and a prominent collector commissioned a piece. Lillian floated through the evening in a daze, accepting congratulations, watching Victor beam with pride. "Thank you," she told him later, back home, kicking off her. "For believing in me, for making this happen. You did this, your talent, your hard work, I just opened a door. Still, you see me, the real me, and you support her, that's..." She felt tears threatening. "That's everything." Victor crossed to her, cupped her face in his hands. "You saved me, Lillian. You took a man who knew only darkness and showed him light. Whatever I can do to support you, to help you shine, it's the least of what you deserve." She kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. And later, in their bed, they celebrated with the kind of passion that still burned between them, bright and consuming. Life wasn't perfect. Victor still had to deal with threats, with rival families, with the weight of his position. Lillian sometimes struggled with the limitations of her life, the security detail, the constant awareness of danger. But they faced it together with honesty and love, and that made all the difference. 2 years into their marriage, Lillian discovered she was pregnant. She stared at the test for a long time, trying to process it. A child, their child, growing inside her. She thought about the world she was bringing this baby into, the risks and dangers. But she also thought about Victor's eyes when he looked at her, about the man he'd become with her love. And she knew, somehow, that they would make it work. Victor came home to find her sitting in the living room, the test on the coffee table. He took one look at it, then at her face, and dropped to his knees in front of her. "Are you sure?" His voice was choked. 3 tests, all positive. "We're having a baby." He said it like a prayer, like a miracle. "Lillian, we're having a baby." She started crying then, and he pulled her into his arms, and they held each other while the reality sank in. Victor's hand came to rest on her stomach, still flat, protecting what grew there. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Your world, the dangers. I know, I'm terrified too, but we'll protect this child with everything we have. I'll make this world safer, I'll build something better, I'll do whatever it takes. Promise me." "I promise, on my life, Lillian. This child will grow up loved and safe and free to be whoever they want to be." She believed him. And 9 months later, when their daughter was born, tiny and perfect with a shock of black hair and her mother's eyes, Victor held her with trembling hands and wept. "Alina," he whispered, "after my grandmother." "Alina," Lillian agreed, too exhausted and happy to care that she looked a mess. Victor looked up at her, this dangerous man utterly undone by the weight of love in his arms. "Thank you for this, for everything, for saving me. We saved each other." And it was true. Lillian had walked away from a life that was slowly killing her and found herself in the arms of a man who saw her, truly saw her, and loved every part of what he found. Victor had built an empire on violence and control, only to discover that surrender to love was the greatest power of all. Their life wasn't easy. The world they inhabited was dark and dangerous, full of threats and complexities. But they faced it together, with honesty and courage and an unwavering commitment. And in the quiet moments, when Victor held their daughter while Lillian painted and sunlight streamed through the windows, they knew they had built something worth fighting for. A family, a home, a love that transformed them both. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. Hey, loves. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end of Victor and Lillian's story. I know this one was intense, with all the danger and the fear and those moments where you probably wanted to shake them both. But that's what I love about stories like these. You know, the way 2 people from completely different worlds can find each other and build something beautiful despite all the odds stacked against them. Lillian's journey from that scary moment with Marcus to finding real, honest love with Victor. It gets me every time. And Victor, this powerful man who thought he was beyond redemption, learning that he deserved love and softness too. Ugh, my heart. I'd love to know what you thought. Which moment got you the most? Was it that first rescue in the gallery? The The moment Victor proposed from his hospital bed, when baby Alina was born. Drop a comment and let me know what touched your heart, what made you hold your breath, or even what made you angry at them. Your thoughts mean everything to me. Seriously. Knowing you were here, listening, feeling these emotions with me, that's what makes all of this worth it. Until next time, my loves, thank you for being here.